Now I'd like to invite our second speaker, Jesse Andrews from the University of Nebraska. Lincoln. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm with the University of Nebraska Lincoln. I'm with the program, the Community and Regional Planning Program. And we're going to talk about at-risk flood areas in primarily eastern Nebraska. So, as recently as you probably saw in the news, there was major flooding in the Oakland, Texas. It was one of the, it was the highest in number of units here. But it's a common type of flooding, flash flooding here, which luckily, due to the geology and the geography of our rivers, doesn't happen as much, but we certainly do have damage, as you see. So I'm with a project that's trying to find these areas that are undercounted or not looked at as much and find out where there's actual risk. Because we don't have a way to inventory risk currently. At least we have a lot of different ways to inventory risk. We don't have a unified way to inventory risk on the structure level. So this is what this project is trying to do, is find out exactly where there would be sort of residual risk for flooding. And so, as many of you know, if you lived here in 2019, there was major flooding in the state of Nebraska. It was a disaster declared for a large number of counties in the eastern part of the state. My project was created in after this flooding occurred, so we see which areas were hit the hardest and which areas, especially the communities, could have additional resources and needed additional resources to sort of work with the floodplain in general and flooding risk in particular. We're working in 3 different counties, as you can see here, they're highlighted. So there's Dodge, Douglas, and Sarpy. And I'm not sure that this was intentional, but it ended up being a really good sample. Because Dodge is quite rural, mostly rural or sort of exurban, as you know, but some of you might know. Sarpy is a little bit wealthier in suburban, and then of course the city of Omaha, the R's in Douglas County. So we have a pretty good mix of urban, sort of suburban and rural areas within this and within the communities, which worked out very well for sort of different types of comparisons. So I'll just go through a few of the different projects that we're doing or that are being done for. And then just sort of talk about them in general. This is Winslow, which is in northern Dodge County, and it is actually currently being relocated. They've accepted a federal offer to relocate. As you can see here, this is primarily all the entire town's in the floodplain. There's not a single area that isn't in the floodplain. So it's being moved up into a higher area. That relocation, as far as I know, is it completed? It hasn't been completed yet. Okay, no, it's still not completed. I didn't think it was. So yeah, it's still ongoing. Federal programs like this can take a while. But that's being done. So there is some action being taken, some pretty dramatic action being taken actually. So these are the communities that we're looking at for the 2019. These are the most affected communities, and here we have sort of the capacity versus the impact. And so these are the communities that had high impacts from the floods in 2019 and also have low capacity. So they don't have any internal capacities because they're small. Generally, they don't have large staffs. They're rural places, and they tend not to be particularly well. So as you can see, it's mostly in eastern Nebraska, that's where the flooding occurs. It's mostly in the Elkhorn and the Missouri and some of the tributaries. So are we prepared for the next flood? I can answer that. Not really, but we're getting there, and hopefully this can help, and what we do can help. So we did a lot of different sort of research projects with this entire grant that we did, and one of them was this was looking where residential development was happening. So right now, there's no way to know exactly where every structure is being placed within the residential area. So we used a machine learning model to detect where the actual changes have been since the flooding. And so we had 3 different ones, as you can see. We kind of go through here. We use machine learning. We look at the region from 2003, and then 2022, and then we do a ground truth and a prediction. Of course, there's error within this, but generally it's fairly accurate. So we had different results for different communities. We did a number of different communities within these counties, and here you can see as we go over them. So we went in by grid, and we saw where growth is, and this is Fremont, for instance, here. And you can see we can pick out small pockets of where there is growth, exactly the numbers, exactly where growth is occurring within the county. And so within Fremont itself, there wasn't a huge amount. Most of the stuff is down here, which is mostly Englewood. But this is a helpful tool for county organizers to sort of see where are we growing and where are we growing where we probably shouldn't be growing, or at least we should be taking precautions where we're growing there. And these are just some more of the results. You see the economy, and you see it within the research in general, is that there's a growth in the floodplain is they're either poor or rich. So there's either high-end houses are being built there, or lower-end home parks or other lower-end housing. It's risky. It's there because it's risky. So you see that dichotomy within these 3 counties. You have some of these, especially in Sarpy, these communities are rather wealthy, and they're building they're building developments right in the floodplain. They follow the law, but they build in the floodplain. And then you have sort of, this is a fairly wealthy community, there's growth here. They build these sort of features out, and they are legal because they make sure to put them 1 foot above what the floodplain is, but they're still at risk, as you can see. But this sort of work that we're doing with machine learning lets us see exactly where this kind of growth is going. Here is in Bellevue, which isn't nearly as bad. Sarpy overall is generally better, but you have places like La Platte, which is entirely essentially a suburb that's built on a sandbank beside the river, which is of course not pretty. So here's our overall results for the housing. Here we have, as you can see in the chart, we have Dodge County, Douglas County, and Sarpy County. We have the percentages of high, upper, middle, low, and low for the housing. This is the total assessed value. This is the new building within those counties between 2003 and 2022. As you can see, Sarpy is mostly high, as I said. The vast majority of the growth there. We have the opposite sort of situation where it's much more spread out in Dodge, but the highest percentage, the second highest percentages are within the low area, which I'm going to go into in a few minutes to show you why that is. We also have demolish. This is the lowest percentage within the paper. So you can, you should probably be, I'm not sure how good these results are because they're so small as far as the demolish pool. But I believe that Dodge percentage is due to like the mobile homes. They weren't necessarily demolished, but they moved on the maps. And then we have existing homes, and here we can go into existing homes within the existing special flood hazard area, which is 1% higher floodplain. As you can see, the existing stock within Sarpy is very high, low. It's very high levels of low middle income housing, and you go on, and you can see sort of the mix here, which is in general, as you can see, there's quite a large difference between the low housing in Dodge and then sort of the more spread out in Douglas, and then sort of a concentration in Sarpy in the low middle. Although that low middle, the actual growth is coming in Sarpy and high. So overall, concentrating high asset areas, the new buildings, the demolished buildings, as you would expect, are overwhelmingly low. You're not going to demolish a building if it's worth something, but generally they're going to be low areas. And existing buildings have a heavy presence in low and middle assessed areas, which is something we're aware of. I think that in general, you need to adopt flood risk through local comprehensive planning, zoning ordinances, building codes, design standards. Essentially what we're already doing, but you just need to do it more targeted and better. There's also tools, innovative tools to support adaptive and high risk corridors. So we have a whole kind of series of projects that could potentially be implemented to do these. But to move on, so this is a project that I actually worked on personally, but so this is about mobile home parks. So within the 3-county area, we have a large differences in the number of mobile home parks, as you would expect. Rural Dodge County has a lot more as far as the total percentage of the housing stock. You have significantly lower here, although they are concentrated. They're in Missouri River. There's an area along the Missouri River in Omaha here that is there's a 7 or 8 of them that are sitting right there. So there tends to be concentration within Douglas and Sarpy, and they tend to be much more spread out within Dodge. So what I did was I did an inventory of every mobile home park within these 3 counties, and I visited a number of them. I went around and I used Google Street Maps if I could to get a general idea of them, so we could rate them as far as what their infrastructure is and what potential with them. So I rated them on the infrastructure levels. I gave them low, high, medium. Of course, I took the building footprints already. I gave a percentage if they were within the regulatory flood zone, and I also used imagery from the 2019 event to see if they were actually within inundation within 2019. And I used all these things, and I used machine learning to come up with sort of a ratings for local government to know where the risk is as far as these parks go. And the answer is that it's overwhelmingly right now. If you look at regulatory risk, it's in Dodge County. This is a very, very large Regency. It's a very, very large park that's completely inundated in 2019, and it's growing since then. But a large percentage of the workforce housing and things are in Dodge. So essentially, Douglas is doing okay. There's a few here that are not in the other places, but these seem to be small. These here, these are along the Missouri River. They have to be moved by levees, which has its problems, which I'll go into. But in general, they're within regulatory areas that are being safe. That's less the case in Dodge. You just have areas that are, quite a few of these parks are just straight out right beside the river, frankly, and they don't really have very much protection. So here's just an example of some of the parks just laid out from a sort of micro view. This is Beazle Acres, which is the highest risk park. It's only a few, and some of these aren't even actual mobile homes, some of these are more travel trailers or things. But as you can see, there is a connectivity, almost the entire area flooded during the 2019 event, all the roads were cut off as well. So again, this has high in virtually everything. This is one I think that could be bought out. This is not an expensive property. This is one that seems to be tailor-made for that. I don't know exactly what's going on with it. I don't even think it's zoned. It's outside of the zoned area. So areas like this are tough to deal with. This is unusual. This is Regency, which I talked about a bit. This is the largest, one of the largest mobile home parks in the region. I think there might be one that's bigger than Omaha, but it's one of the largest. It's also, I mean, this is an appreciable percentage of workforce housing in Dodge County. It's large enough to do that. And Dodge County's not that big. But it flooded, as you can see. There was flooding here, and there's issues with the way the connectivity run. So there's definitely things that the local government could do here to make this a little bit more safe within the context of sort of the street view and things here. But overall, this one's this one's obviously significantly better than the last one I showed you, but it still has issues, just mostly due to proximity to the river. And this is one, this is one near the Missouri River in Omaha, actually. So the issue here is there seems to be issues with zoning enforcement. Officially, it's against the code. You have to have different types of connections, and you have to have these things bolted down. A lot of these travel trailers in these parks are not following those codes, so this is an enforcement issue. But beyond that, I mean, they follow the law in Omaha. These follow the law. They're still elevated due to some physical vulnerabilities, but they're significantly less so than the ones in West County. And here's the same one. This is the same park I just showed you, but here's the levee from the Missouri River. This is another source of risk, which is completely not sort of mentioned generally within the literature and not thought about enough. But we know that these levees break. We had them break in Sarpy County, and they actually inundated a couple of the parks, whatever push for good. So we know these levees break. We know where they sit. So if there were to be a levee break here, it would be absolutely disastrous because many of these are travel trailers and they're not bolted down as they should be. At least a good number of them are. So that's a potential issue as well. We have to look beyond regulatory risks. I think some of us are doing that, or there are people doing it. I think after 2019, at least in the state of Nebraska, people realize that they do break and that there are major risks for being near a levee, and they need to be maintained, and you need to bring them up, especially vulnerable areas like this. Overall, for the recommendations for the mobile home parks, buy out Peaceful Acres, which is the smallest one. There's a couple others that are probably right on the edge of sort of viability to buy them out. Stricter siting. Right now, there's not really a mobile home zoning for all of these counties. There's different zoning regimes, and sometimes they're commercial, sometimes they're residential. So they kind of exist. And this is national, way mobile home parks work for zoning. They exist in a lot of different potential categories. So sort of come up with a unified zoning for them. What are the risks and what sort of things should we take to mitigate those risks? Would help a lot. Disallow long-term habitation. This is another issue, but it's an enforcement issue. Disallow habitation of campers and RVs in those areas, or at least regulate to make sure that they can move. A lot of this is working with landowners. And the Sarpy's generally good. The only thing is they closed one of the parks actually after 2019. They've been I won't say they've been good. They've been restrictive. They've been extremely restrictive about mobile home, which can be good or bad depending on your view of the need for cheaper housing. This is the paper for that, what I just spoke of. This paper's just came out, so if you want to read any more about this as far as mobile homes and how it goes, you can do this in natural hazards. Take home message is flooding recovery is complex, costly, and prolonged. So we want to make it as painless as possible before it happens. So flooding's inevitable. We will have another major flood. We don't know when, but it will happen. It will happen here, and it will damage quite a few things. Development in prone areas continues to increase. So we're still having development. There's different types of problematic development. There's still development going on in the floodplain, despite what we know. Special sites we need to look at. I talked about mobile homes, but there's also a lot of risk with things like RVs and camping sites. They're with flash floods in particular. Nebraska, it's not as big of an issue, but it still is potentially an issue, especially for sites that are right beside the river. There's just pre-disaster mitigation. More integrated corrective approaches are essential to foster long-term resilience. So essentially, we need to communicate with one another. There's a lot of different people who do this type of work, different angles. One of the reasons we have this conference is sort of to come together and to sort of speak with each other to figure out what works as far as all our different issues. Acknowledgements state the state of Nebraska's Department of Economic Health and all the grant funders and Dr. Tang here, who's the head of this department.
Thank you.
In the first research project you were showing where you were looking at about how development had changed, I guess in the past couple decades. Was that, so did you have the floodplain also overlaid there when you were looking at the maps? Is that the 100-year?
Yeah, this is SFHA, so it's 100-year and 500, all the, so it's all, if you do, so it's all the A's.
Okay.
So yeah, this is just development within those zones. And just to be clear, this is development isn't this 2023, it's not, so we didn't use it.
Yeah, I think it is only either 2010 or.
Yeah. So, but that might be a small issue, yeah, in general, this is where the floodplain is.
When you talk about some of the like recommendations for like zoning, recommendations for changes to the ordinances, can you talk about any like specifics of what some of those recommendations would be?
Yeah, that's another paper on the revise that will review all of the Nebraska zoning code for over 100 counties, municipals together. And found that they can only reach to half expectation as we recommend, the FEMA recommend policies. They take some action, but not active. So that's, yeah, we, whenever the paper publish, I can send that to you.
That'd be great.
We'll invest it back. So, thank you. Good question.
Anyone else?
So the next flood is inevitable, right? It's coming, and so we're not prepared, as you said. So what are the main challenges? How can we?
Well, like on my part, what I do is I figure out where the most likely this is to come. And that's that, and then I hope that the sort of the policymakers need to take at least take it into consideration where this things are going to happen. I think there's a lot of easy things as far as, just things with mobile home parks. It's not really that difficult, or even RVs, things like that. There's a lot of really low hanging fruit, but I think more code enforcement and that sort of thing than there is giant, huge changes. If Douglas County and those things just enforce the codes that are existing, and I think it would actually have a reasonable effect on the next lot piece of the Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.